Several years ago, I had a student named David. One day he was in my room, not during class, just talking, and he asked me, he said, "Wamsted, do you ever say the N-word?" Now, I want to be clear, David is black, and he actually said the N-word, which I didn't, and I won't. But I want you to have a picture of the scene. I shoot back, indignant. "What? David, why would you ask me that? No!" But he won't let up. He keeps at me, and I'm getting more and more upset, and so he switches tactics. I have a soft spot for Kanye West and those first couple of albums, and David knows this, so he says, "All right, Wamsted, let's say you're in your car, driving around, all alone, the windows are up, and you rapping along with Kanye. What you gonna do?" I'm really uncomfortable here. My face is getting red, my ears are getting pink. I just say, "No way, David, I just skipped those lyrics." Which is most of the song sometimes. If it sounds ridiculous, it was anything but. David was testing me. He wanted to know if I was trustworthy. He respected me enough to learn math, but he wanted to know more about me as a person, not as a teacher. I get that. You might be feeling the same way right now. Am I going to trust this guy? I get that too. My name is Jay Wamsted. I've been teaching math here. I'm about to enter my 13th year. I spend all day around young people. I spend my time here teaching, and then I go home and I take care of my 4 small children. I love both these jobs. Being a teacher and a parent, it's mostly the same thing. You're mostly trying to convince somebody to see things your way, and that person mostly ignores you. There's one big difference for me here. Here at Mays, almost all of my students are black. I have a few Hispanic students, but something like 97% of our student body is black. But when I go home, my children, like me and my wife, they're white. Thinking about a quantum leap I want to see for the future, that is easy. It's a change I think about almost every day. I want to see a world where one of my students could run into one of my children out there in the streets of Atlanta, absent of this disease we call racism. A world where a younger black man wouldn't have to ask an older white guy about the N-word. A world where the color of our skin would play no part in our ability to trust one another. It's ambitious, I know. Maybe I should have shot lower. But you know what they say about the best way to eat an elephant? You take it one bite at a time. Let's take a bite out of racism right here. Sure, it's a big thing, it's a huge thing, and we got 10 minutes. But that elephant isn't going anywhere until we start to eat it. Why not now? Part 2, a little bit of background. I heard on a podcast the other day that we don't have a race problem in America, we have a racism problem. Race, differences in skin tone and body features, that's not a problem. Racism, though, the belief that some of those skins are inherently better than others, that's the problem. And it's a problem that's led historically and still leads presently to so much pain, so much suffering, so much inequity. It seems like an impossible problem. But there's good news here. We're not trying to fix race. We're not trying to wipe away the differences that make us so interesting and diverse. Rather, we're trying to fix the prejudice, the hatred, the fear that some people feel when they see those differences. Race is a part of who we are. There's an education writer, her name is Lisa Delpit. She says if you don't see color, then you don't see people. We're not trying to wash race away. We're just trying to teach people how not to be afraid of somebody that's different. In 2008, like a lot of white people, I thought that America had taken its last step towards ending the racism that has haunted our shores since that day over 500 years ago when the Europeans landed here and stole land from the native population. Barack Obama became president, and though I voted for him twice, I'm gonna admit to you right now, I never thought he was gonna win. I never thought so many white people could vote for a black man, push him over the line to become the most powerful person in the world. But when he did win, school here was so good. We didn't do math, we watched speeches, we looked at electoral maps, and we talked about how we all felt. There's a political cartoon from that day. It is still on my wall. It's the Lincoln Memorial. And Honest Abe is leaning out. He's got his fist down. Obama's on the ground leaning up. They're fist bumping. They're both smiling. It felt like we had fixed something that day, and you know what I mean. Something that Lincoln started all those years ago in 1863, something we were going to see the end of in 2008. Fist bumps, the end of racism. And then racism didn't end, which probably came as a surprise to exactly 0 black people. Some of the response to Obama in Washington, that's just politics, yeah. But the birthers, the guys that refused to believe this black man was born in America, made him produce 2 birth certificates and still didn't believe him, that's not politics, that's racism. And remember that congressman shouting out, "You lie," in the middle of a speech? He shouted it twice. Can you imagine something like that happening to Bill Clinton or one of the Bushes? And then Trayvon Martin is killed. And yeah, his killer wasn't white. But the message was clear. Black people, you better be careful. And then Eric Garner is killed for not being polite to a police officer. He wasn't careful. Michael Brown wasn't careful. And then 12-year-old Tamir Rice is killed for carrying a pellet gun while being black. Walter Scott, Freddie Gray, Charleston, and all along the way you have white people on TV saying this has nothing to do with race, that it's about this or that or the other, but it's not about race. 12-year-old Tamir Rice would have been killed even if he was white. It was just an accident. Trayvon, Eric, Michael, Walter, Freddie, they're all accidents. And then Donald Trump, the most famous birther of all, becomes president. And it was official. Barack Obama was not going to be able to heal our original sins of slavery and oppression. Racism hadn't gone away. Racism wasn't going anywhere. Now we have white people in the streets, marching, carrying Confederate flags and Nazi banners, chanting out they want to take our country back. We have white people refusing to grant black athletes the right to peaceably protest, telling them that they should just be grateful for all the money they make and be quiet. White people will cheer a black man on if he catches the ball in the right part of a field. They'll go crazy for him, but they will tear him apart if he tries to take a knee, use his power to protest the mistreatment of a child like Tamir Rice. So here we are, in the middle of all this anger, this fear, this hatred. We're not politicians or athletes. We're not white supremacists. We're just people, regular people, stuck in a world where racism hasn't ended. What do we do? Part 3, in my classroom. A couple of times a year, I get called a racist by a student. You gotta remember, I'm the only white person in my room every day, all day, surrounded by hundreds of black and brown faces. So it probably makes sense to a student when he or she feels that I'm mistreating them to come back at me with something like that. When they're angry, accuse me of racism. It used to be that I would play with it. I would say something like, "You think I choose to be surrounded by black people because I'm racist? You think I've come down here every day for 13 years? Like some kind of plot of the white man to take down the black man? Like I'm a spy?" And that'll get a laugh. And it would usually get a laugh from the student that came at me in the first place. And for years, that felt good enough. But last year, well, things just felt tense. And you know what I mean? The election was just going on. And it was coming up a couple of times a week. And students kept asking me who I was going to vote for, like it was a test of my ability to be their teacher, like David and the N-word. And no matter how many times I said Clinton, they kept asking. And so last year, when a frustrated student finally accused me of racism, I knew that making a joke was the wrong move. Barack Obama was giving way to Donald Trump, and something about my classroom had to change. I'm never going to forget the first person who called me a racist. It was early in my career, here at Mays, over 10 years ago. I was having so much trouble with a student I will call Sean. Sean wasn't doing classwork, he wasn't doing homework, no kind of work. He was just talking and playing, and we kept butting heads. And so finally one day, when I had to ask him 3 or 4 times to take out his headphones and work with his group on their assignment, as I was walking away, he muttered under his breath, barely loud enough for me to hear, "You just don't like black people." And I freaked out. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't nearly a good enough teacher yet to handle something like this. And so I blustered, and I sputtered, and I kind of then stuttered, and I said, "That's it. We're going to go see the principal." Right. Looking back, it's a ridiculous thing to take a child to the principal for. I can only imagine Sean now following me down the hall just laughing. How much trouble was he going to get into? None. He didn't do anything wrong. He was wrong, of course. I do like black people. And he did get smart with me. But I should have been able to handle that on my own. The accusation of racism, though, just pushed all these buttons and I flipped out. So I got him downstairs to the principal and I explained the situation. And he kept Sean for me for the rest of class. But I can just imagine him, too, watching me as I walked out the door, thinking to himself, "Really, Wamsted? For what? Because Sean doesn't trust you?" I never did figure out how to teach Sean. I know I lost a lot of respect that day. I know I should have said something like, Sean, I like black people plenty. You driving me crazy, but that's got nothing to do with the color of your skin. Now it's time to do some math. Let's get down to business. I didn't say that. I pawned off my responsibility, lost a chance to earn Sean's trust. We never did figure out how to get along. And then years later, I was thinking about this story, and I Googled his name, and I saw a mugshot looking back at me. And then it wasn't just about my story of a bad year with a student. It was about his story and the part I played in school having failed him. And I had to stop myself from breaking down and crying right there in the middle of third period, surrounded by students. Did I put Sean in jail? No. But did I do my best, my very best, to help him stay out? Also, no. And that is a burden I have carried with me every day. But then last year, when the election was pushing me towards a more honest way to engage with these conversations, a girl was leaving my room. It was the end of class. She was the last one out. And she turned, said over her shoulder, offhandedly, Mr. Wamsted, you were the first white person I ever trusted. And at first, I was like, wow, what kind of world is this that we live in? That a 17-year-old black girl can go her whole life and never trust a white person? But you know the answer to that question. This is a world that pops with race, pops with racism. It pops with an anger at our first black president that was unmistakably racist. Over half of my students' life had been spent with this first black president in the public eye, under attack for little more than the color of his skin, the color of her skin. How is somebody that looks like me not supposed to appear untrustworthy to somebody that looks like her? I don't blame her or Sean or David for not trusting me off the bat. I get it. I consider it one of my finest accomplishments here at Mays to be the first white person that this girl ever trusted. I was no longer the man that had failed Sean. The strange magic of intentionality and experience and time, it had changed me. I was somebody worth trusting now. This is too big a responsibility to go about making jokes about racism anymore. This is too big a responsibility to do anything other than respond with difficult honesty when these hard questions happen. Yeah, white people have a long, horrible history of racism. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry for what some of us did and what some of us still do. Tell me what I can do better, because I want to be somebody worth trusting. Part 4, next steps. David came back to my room later on in the year. He was in my room every day for class, but he came back one day before class. He had a friend with him this time. He said to me, didn't even say hello, Wamsted, hey, let me use your deodorant. I had deodorant. I ride my bicycle to work, and I keep a stick in my bag. But that's the word, stick, not spray. I told him, David, I don't have any spray. I don't share stick deodorant. Sorry, man. But he wouldn't take no for an answer. He was getting more and more agitated. So finally, I had to get loud with him. I said something like, David, I am not going to share my stick deodorant with you. And he got loud right back at me. Why? Because I'm black? Because I'm unclean? You don't want to share your deodorant with some unclean black man? And this time, I didn't flip out. And this time, I didn't make a joke. This time, I looked him in the eyes, man to man, and I said, David, it must be serious for you to come at me with all that racism stuff. Here, you can use my deodorant, brother. He took it. He turned to his friend. He calmed down instantly. I knew I'd get him with all that black man stuff. White people hate being called racist. Turns back to me. Thanks, Wamsted. You are all right after all. And then he burst out laughing. His friend burst out laughing. I realized I'd been played, and I burst out laughing. And it was so glorious. For a moment or so there in my classroom, sitting with this 16-year-old boy who had finally learned to trust me. We were all right after all. I gotta believe that David would have trusted me either way, even if I'd held my ground on the deodorant. It was stick, right? But it was a chance for me to get to show him that I trusted him too. And that's got to mean something. For trust to matter, it's got to work both ways. And we've got to learn to trust each other. I don't know when it happened for David and I, but it happened. Strange magic. We don't have a race problem in America. We have a racism problem. White people, go out, share your deodorant with someone, even if it's stick. Learn how to be somebody worth trusting. Black people, give us a chance, or two, or three, talk to us, laugh, build bridges. Sometimes even those quantum leaps have to start with those smallest of steps. That's the only way we're going to be able to eat this elephant we call racism, one bite at a time. Thank you.